The sudden crash of glass downstairs ripped me from my sleep. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive silence that followed. I wasn't alone. He was here. I knew it. The air in my bedroom felt thick, charged with a terror I'd become intimately familiar with over the past few weeks. Just yesterday, I'd found another one of his gifts on my doorstep, a meticulously arranged display of dead roses, each stem tied with a black ribbon. And before that, the chilling notes slipped under my door, filled with unsettling observations about my daily routine. "Enjoyed your morning coffee, Sarah? The way the steam curled from your mug was quite picturesque." He knew too much. It had started subtly, almost innocently. A new neighbor, Mr. Abernathy, moved into the dilapidated house across the street. At first, he seemed like any other reclusive older man. He kept to himself, his curtains always drawn, and his garden overgrown with wild, untamed foliage. I'd waved once, a polite, neighborly gesture, and he'd simply stared, a cold, unreadable expression on his face. Then came the incidents. Small things at first. My mail would be opened, resealed with a different type of tape. Items in my garden would be rearranged. A gnomish statue I'd had for years suddenly faced my bedroom window, its painted eyes seeming to watch me. I dismissed it as paranoia, the usual jitters of living alone, but the incidents escalated. One evening, I found a single black feather on my pillow, even though my windows had been shut all day. Another time, I woke to the distinct smell of his cheap pipe tobacco wafting from my living room, only to find the door still locked from the inside. I started triple-checking my locks, installing extra security, but the feeling of being watched never left me. The police were no help. "No forced entry, ma'am," they'd say with a weary sigh. "We can't act on suspicion alone." I understood their position, but it offered no comfort. My world was shrinking, consumed by a constant state of unease. I was trapped in my own home, a prisoner of his invisible presence. Now, the glass. It wasn't a gift this time. This was different. This was an invasion. My breath hitched in my throat as I heard a faint creak from the stairs. He was coming up. I scrambled silently from my bed, fumbling for my phone. My fingers trembled as I tried to dial, the screen a blinding beacon in the darkness. No signal. Of course, the rural area where I lived was notorious for spotty reception. Panic seized me, a cold hand clutching my heart. I had to hide. My gaze darted around the room, settling on the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. It was heavy, dusty, a relic from my grandmother, but it was my only option. I lifted the lid, the hinges groaning softly in protest, and squeezed inside, pulling the lid down just enough to leave a sliver of space for air. Through the crack, I saw the faint glow of light spilling into my room from the hallway, a flashlight beam, dancing erratically, painting the familiar objects of my sanctuary with an eerie, distorted glow. My eyes burned, straining to see, to understand what was happening. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoing through the silence. They stopped just outside my door. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I held my breath. Every muscle in my body tensed, preparing for the inevitable. The doorknob turned, slowly, with a soft click. The door swung open, revealing a gaunt silhouette framed against the dim light of the hallway. Mr. Abernathy. He stepped into my room, his figure looming, a dark omen. He wasn't wearing his usual tweed jacket. Tonight, he was in a dark, shapeless cloak that seemed to absorb all light. His eyes, even from my hiding spot, held an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. He moved slowly, his flashlight beam sweeping across my furniture, illuminating the photographs on my dresser, the books on my shelf. He wasn't searching frantically, he was savoring the moment, like a predator toying with its prey. Sarah. His voice was a low rasp, a sound I'd only heard in my nightmares. I know you're here. My blood ran cold. He knew my name. He had always known my name. That was the most terrifying part. He continued his methodical search, his footsteps drawing closer to the cedar chest. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to disappear, to become invisible. I could hear his ragged breathing, the soft shuffle of his shoes on the carpet. The air grew heavy with the scent of old tobacco, and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. Then the flashlight beam hit the chest. He paused, my breath caught in my throat. I could feel his presence, a chilling weight pressing down on me, even through the thick wood. A faint smile touched his lips, visible in the brief flash of the light. Found you. The lid of the chest creaked open. Days earlier, the unsettling feeling had begun to truly manifest. It started with small objects disappearing from my yard. A watering can, then a garden trowel. Harmless, I'd thought. Probably just misplaced or borrowed by a neighbor. But then the mail started going missing, specifically packages I knew were due. I lived a quiet life, worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, and rarely had visitors. The idea of someone watching me felt absurd. One sweltering afternoon, I was watering my prize-winning petunias when I noticed him. Mr. Abernathy. He was standing perfectly still in his overgrown garden, facing my house. He wasn't tending to his plants, he was simply staring. I felt a prickle of unease, but I forced myself to smile and offer a small wave. He didn't wave back, he didn't even blink, just kept staring, his eyes like dark, hollow pools. It was the kind of stare that made your skin crawl. Later that week, I found the first note. It was slipped under my front door, written on thick, cream-colored paper in elegant, almost calligraphic script. Your morning walks are quite invigorating, Sarah. The way the sunlight catches your hair is truly captivating. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. How did he know about my morning walks? I always left before dawn, before anyone else in the quiet cul-de-sac was awake. I called the police. Officer Miller, a kind but weary man, took my statement. He explained that without proof of forced entry or direct threats, determined to take matters into my own hands, I invested in a state-of-the-art security system. Cameras were strategically placed around the perimeter of my house, motion sensors installed on every window and door. I thought, naively, that this would deter him. It didn't. The incidents continued, evolving into something far more personal. I'd wake up to find items rearranged in my kitchen, a single teacup moved from the cupboard to the counter, a book turned to a specific page on my nightstand. The security cameras showed nothing. No entry, no movement, just an empty house. It was as if he could simply be there without leaving a trace. One evening, I came home to find a small, intricate wooden bird carving on my kitchen table. It was beautifully detailed, a testament to incredible skill, but it radiated an unsettling energy. It wasn't mine. I knew with a sickening certainty where it had come from. Mr. Abernathy was a collector of strange, hand-carved objects. His front window displayed a curious array of wooden figurines. This was a message, a declaration. I rushed back outside, my heart pounding, to check the security camera footage from the moment I'd left for work. The video showed nothing, just me leaving. Then the empty porch, the empty yard. It was impossible. Yet, the bird sat on my table, undeniable proof of his trespass. I started to withdraw, my once vibrant life becoming a series of calculated movements designed to avoid detection. I stopped my morning walks, pulled down the blinds, and only ventured out for absolute necessities. My once cozy home felt like a cage. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking presence, every creak of the floorboards a confirmation of his proximity. The dead roses appeared 2 days before the glass crash, a perfect bouquet, arranged with an almost artistic precision. Each black ribbon a symbol of something I couldn't quite grasp, but that filled me with profound dread. I just stared at them, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't just a neighbor, this was something else, someone who had chosen me for reasons I couldn't comprehend. The final straw came with the letter. Not a note this time, but a full letter slipped through my mail slot while I was out for groceries. It was long, rambling, filled with poetic but disturbing language. It spoke of destiny, of a connection that transcended the mundane, of me being the missing piece. It wasn't overtly threatening, but the underlying possessiveness, the sheer audacity of his words, made my stomach churn. "My dear Sarah," it read, "our souls are intertwined, our paths destined to converge. You are the light I have sought, the muse for my solitary existence. Soon, our journey will truly begin." I remember dropping the letter, my hands shaking so violently I could barely pick it up. He was losing his grip, his carefully constructed facade of reclusiveness crumbling. This wasn't just a creepy neighbor. This was an obsession, and I was at the center of it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, a blanket wrapped tightly around me, clutching a kitchen knife. Every shadow seemed to shift, every sound a precursor to his arrival. I knew he was coming. I could feel it, an almost psychic awareness of his approaching presence. And then, the crash, the shattering glass downstairs, the sound that had ripped me from a desperate, fitful sleep. It wasn't a warning, it was a signal. The game was over. He was no longer content with lurking in the shadows. He was here, in my house, and he was looking for me, which brought me back to the cedar chest, its lid slowly opening, revealing Mr. Abernathy's gaunt face illuminated by the harsh beam of his flashlight. His eyes, though, were what truly held me. They weren't just dark. They seemed to gleam with a manic joy, a disturbing triumph. "You're beautiful, Sarah," he whispered, his voice oddly soft now, a stark contrast to the menace in his eyes. He reached a hand towards me. His fingers were long and thin, almost skeletal. I recoiled, pressing myself further into the back of the chest, my breath catching in my throat. The knife I had been clutching was gone, lost somewhere in my panicked scramble. I was utterly defenseless. He didn't grab me immediately. Instead, he simply observed, a strange, almost academic curiosity in his gaze. A lovely hiding spot, ingenious. My mind raced, searching desperately for an escape, a plan, anything. But fear had paralyzed me, turning my thoughts into a jumbled mess. I could only stare back, my eyes wide with terror, as he slowly, deliberately, reached into the chest. His hand brushed my arm, and I flinched violently. He didn't seem to notice. His fingers moved past me, delving deeper into the chest's contents. I watched, bewildered, as he pulled out an old, faded photograph. It was a picture of my grandmother, taken decades ago, when she was a young woman standing in this very house. "Your grandmother," he murmured, his voice laced with a strange reverence. "She was quite magnificent, wasn't she?" My confusion warred with my fear. Why was he talking about my grandmother? What did she have to do with any of this? He looked up from the photograph, his gaze returning to me. But now there was a different quality to it, a strange mix of adoration and something else I couldn't quite place. "You have her eyes, Sarah, the same spark." He then pulled out another item from the chest, a small, tarnished silver locket. It was an antique, a family heirloom that had belonged to my grandmother. I hadn't seen it in years, believing it lost. "She always kept this close," he said, opening the locket. Inside were two tiny, faded photographs, one of my grandmother, the other of a younger, darker-haired man I didn't recognize. Mr. Abernathy traced the man's image with his finger. He was a good man, a kind man, but he didn't understand. He couldn't see the truth. He closed the locket and looked at me, a profound sadness now mixed with the manic gleam in his eyes. "You see, Sarah, your grandmother, she was my muse, my inspiration, my everything." My jaw dropped. He had known my grandmother. What was he talking about? She had passed away when I was a child. He seemed to anticipate my unspoken questions. "I was young then, Sarah. So foolish. I loved her, you see, desperately, but she chose another. Your grandfather." He said the last words with a hint of bitterness. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "I watched them, just as I've watched you. I wrote her letters, left her gifts, just as I've done for you, but she never understood. She never saw the depth of my devotion." A chill, far colder than the fear of imminent danger, spread through me. This wasn't about me, not entirely. I was a replacement, a substitute. He wasn't obsessed with Sarah. He was obsessed with an echo of a past love. "When she passed," he continued, his voice taking on a distant, haunted quality, "I felt a part of me die with her. I knew then that I had to find her again. A piece of her, a reflection." He gestured vaguely at me. "And then I saw you move in, the spitting image of her, a sign, a second chance." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't a simple stalker. He was a deeply disturbed man, trapped in a delusion, reliving a past that never truly was. I wasn't Sarah to him. I was my grandmother, reincarnated. "I tried to make you see, Sarah," he said, his voice rising slightly in pitch, a desperate plea. "To understand our connection, to fulfill our destiny." I could see the frantic energy building in his eyes, the thin veil of sanity threatening to tear. I had to get out. I had to break free from this twisted narrative he had built around me. "Mr. Abernathy," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling in my core, "my grandmother loved my grandfather. They had a beautiful life together. You're mistaken. His face contorted, the brief flicker of sadness replaced by a flash of rage. Mistaken? No, you don't understand. He stole her from me. He kept us apart. He lunged forward, not at me, but deeper into the chest, pulling out an old leather-bound journal. It was my grandmother's diary, a treasure I'd sought for years. She wrote about me, he insisted, his voice feverish. She wrote about her true love. He flipped through the brittle pages, his movements clumsy with excitement. I saw my opportunity. While his attention was fixated on the journal, I shifted my weight, pushing with all my might against the opposite side of the chest. It was heavy, but the element of surprise was on my side. With a groan of protest, the chest tipped, sending Miss Abernathy sprawling to the floor, the journal and locket scattering around him. He cried out, startled, his flashlight rolling away into the shadows. In that precious moment of darkness and confusion, I scrambled out of the chest. My legs were numb, but adrenaline coursed through me, giving me a surge of strength. I didn't look back. I didn't hesitate. I burst from my bedroom, down the stairs, and towards the shattered front door. The cool night air hit my face, a liberating shock. I could hear him shouting behind me, a garbled string of accusations and pleas. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, down my driveway, across the street, not towards Mr. Abernathy's house, but away from it, towards the distant flicker of streetlights, towards the promise of safety. I didn't stop until I reached the main road, until my lungs burned and my legs ached. I collapsed onto the curb, gasping for breath. The terrifying image of Mr. Abernathy's face burned into my mind. As I lay there, trembling, a car approached in the distance, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I waved frantically, tears streaming down my face. Help was coming. The next few weeks were a blur of police reports, interviews, and the surreal experience of recounting my ordeal. They found Mr. Abernathy still in my bedroom, cradling my grandmother's journal and locket, muttering about lost love and intertwined destinies. He was taken into custody, placed under psychiatric evaluation. I never returned to that house. The memories, the echoes of his presence were too strong. I sold it, packed my bags, and moved to a new city, a place where no one knew my grandmother, where I could simply be Sarah. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the shadows lengthen, I still see his eyes, those dark, hollow pools, gleaming with a love and obsession meant for someone else, someone from a time long past. And I remember the chilling truth. Sometimes the greatest horrors aren't born from malice, but from a love twisted by delusion, a love that refuses to let go, even across generations. It's a love that, even now, makes me check my locks twice and glance nervously at the drawn curtains of houses I pass, always wondering what hidden stories lie behind them.